Tashona Butler carefully adjusted the pillow beneath the head of Mrs. Dolores Green, a 93-year-old woman with cataracts and arthritis, who happened to be one of her favorite residents at Golden Autumn Nursing Home. The facility sat in the older part of San Marcos, Texas, and Tashona had been working there as a nurse's aide for the past 4 years. "Honey, you're kind of quiet today," Mrs. Green remarked, straining to focus her fading eyes on Tashona's face. "Just tired, Mrs. Green." "Nothing major," Tashona replied, forcing some cheer into her voice. The truth was she wasn't just tired. Today marked the anniversary of her husband's arrest. 5 long years since her life had been shattered. She still remembered that morning vividly, the sudden pounding on the door of their tiny apartment. She had just stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, thinking it was a neighbor needing salt or sugar. The memory washed over her like a tidal wave. Deontay had been sitting on the couch, startled and confused, when the officers read him his rights and placed him in handcuffs. They accused him of robbing a gas station. Tashona had screamed that it was impossible, that her husband had been home with her all night. But then the evidence came, video footage, fingerprints, and witnesses who swore it was him. At the trial, Deontay confessed. He admitted he needed money for his mother's cancer treatments. He was sentenced to 15 years in Oakdale Federal Prison in Louisiana. Tashona would never forget his final words before being led away. "I love you, Tash. Wait for me." She had promised she would, and she had waited. "Baby girl, can you give me a glass of water?" Mrs. Green's frail voice pulled her out of her storm of memories. "Of course, Mrs. Green." Wiping away an unexpected tear, Tashona went to fetch the water. In the staff lounge, she sank into the worn couch and slipped a photograph of Deontay from her uniform pocket. His wide smile and bright eyes still gave her strength. She missed him terribly. Visits were rare. Oakdale was nearly a 9-hour drive from San Marcos. Without her own car, she relied on buses, which were expensive and exhausting. Most of her paycheck disappeared into rent, food, and necessities. On top of that, she had once helped cover Deontay's mother's medical expenses until a woman passed away 2 years into his sentence. Sighing, she tucked the photograph back into her pocket and returned to work. Her shift was due to end at 4 p.m., and she still had charts to finish. As she filled out paperwork for another resident, the head nurse, Marlene, approached. "Tash, I need a favor. We've got a new home care client, Mr. Harris. Recently had hip surgery. Lives out in Riverside Estates. Can you take this one? It's extra hours." Extra money meant survival. Tashona nodded immediately. "Good. Here's the address. 32 Oak Street. Be there by 5:30. When her shift ended, she headed for the bus stop. After transfer, she arrived at Riverside Estates, a pristine neighborhood with sprawling lawns, gleaming cars, and homes too perfect for someone like her to dream of. Checking her phone, she walked down Oak Street. House number 32 was a sleek one-story with wide windows and a black SUV in the driveway. She was almost there when a man stepped out of the neighboring house. Something about his walk made her heart stutter. She slowed, watching him close the door. When he turned, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. The same tall build, the same broad shoulders, the same tilt of the head. He wore expensive clothes now, looking polished and successful, but he was unmistakable. It was Deontay. Frozen, she watched him slide into a silver sedan and drive right past her without recognition. She saw his face clearly. Her husband, the man who was supposed to be locked away in Louisiana. Before she realized it, she was running after the car, but it turned the corner and disappeared. Heart racing, she walked back toward the house he had come from. Number 34. The mailbox read Thompson. Through the window, she saw a young woman cradling a baby. She was striking, beautiful, with long braids styled intricately. The front door opened, and the woman stepped outside with a child. "Can I help you?" she asked, frowning. Tashona stammered. I'm looking for number 32, Mr. Harris's place." "Across the street," the woman said, pointing. "Thank you," Tashona whispered, quickly retreating. She forced herself to complete her visit with Mr. Harris, but her mind reeled. Deontay, or someone identical to him, was here, living a new life with another woman and a child. As soon as she returned to her small apartment, she grabbed the phone and called Oakdale Federal Prison. "Oakdale Federal Prison, how can I help you?" came a tired male voice. "Yes, I'd like to ask about an inmate, Deontay Butler. I'm his wife, Tashona Butler." Typing clicked on the other end. "Yes, Mrs. Butler. Inmate Butler is in our custody, serving a 15-year sentence for armed robbery. What did you want to know?" Her stomach dropped. Is he physically there? Right now?" "Of course, ma'am. All inmates are accounted for unless in the infirmary or solitary confinement." "And he's not transferred? Not in the hospital?" "No, ma'am. Records show Butler is in cell block C. You may schedule a visit if you like." Thanking the clerk, she hung up, trembling. Officially, Deontay was still in prison, yet she had seen him, clear as day, outside the house in Riverside Estates. She opened her dresser drawer and pulled out a box of his letters. The last one, dated just last month, spoke of prison life, his longing for her, and hopes for parole in a few years. She reread it over and over, then stared at his photo in prison garb, thinner but still smiling. It was him, the same man. Sleep evaded her that night. Dreams of Deontay filled her mind, dreams where he walked past her without recognition, holding another woman's hand. By morning, her decision was made. This was her day off, and she would return to Riverside Estates. She had to know the truth. Tashona called the nursing home and told them she was sick. The lie felt small compared with the need to find out what was happening. She pulled on her best jeans and a light blue blouse, the outfit she usually saved for rare visits to Deontay in prison, and studied her reflection. Tired eyes, dark crescents beneath them, but still a face with high cheekbones and full lips. Deontay had always said he fell in love with her at first sight because of those lips. 2 buses later, she arrived at Riverside Estates. All the while, her mind ran through possible explanations. Maybe Deontay had a twin she'd never known about, but she knew his family, his mother and sister, and there had been no mention of another close relative. Maybe it was just an uncanny resemblance. Then why was this man living in her town, as if he'd shown up on purpose while Deontay served his sentence? Disembarking at the right stop, Tashona walked to number 34, Oak Street. The silver sedan was gone, a small relief. Perhaps he was at work. She paused, pretending to study her map, when the same young woman with the baby stepped out of the house. The child, barely a year old, nestled in her arms in a bright jumpsuit. The woman locked the door and headed toward the park at the end of the street. This was her chance. Tashona followed at a distance, hoping to overhear something useful or to wait for the man's return. In the park, the woman set the child on a swing and hummed as she rocked him. Tashona sat on a nearby bench, pretending to read from her phone while keeping the family in view. Nearly an hour later, when doubt was creeping in, he appeared, Deontay's double, stepping into the park in a dark blue suit that made him look like a successful businessman. He greeted the woman with a kiss, scooped the child into his arms, and the 3 of them strolled toward the park exit. Tashona's heart hammered so loudly she wondered if anyone could hear it. She rose and followed, keeping her distance. They returned to number 34. Tashona stopped at the corner, unsure what to do next, until resolve hardened inside her. She would wait until the family left again, then confront him face to face. The wait didn't take long. After about 30 minutes, the woman reappeared, a large bag slung over her shoulder and the baby cradled to her chest. A cab pulled up. She climbed in and drove away. The man was alone. 10 minutes later, Tashona rang the bell. Her heart felt like it would leap from her throat. The door opened, and there he was, Deontay's image, only cleaner cut, better dressed than anything her husband could afford, his hair cropped short where Deontay used to wear dreadlocks. He stared at her, shock and recognition flashing across his face. "Tashona," he said, his voice the same low timbre with that faint rasp she knew all too well. "Who are you?" she demanded, crossing her arms. "You are not my husband. Deontay Butler is in Oakdale Federal Prison. I called yesterday." He glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then grabbed her arm and dragged her inside. slamming the door. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, fear in his eyes. "I asked first." Tashona snapped, wrenching her hand free. "Who are you, and why do you look exactly like my husband?" He ran his hand over his face, visibly unsettled. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to see me." His voice trembled. There was steel in her tone now. "Answer me." He held up his hands. All right. I'm Ezekiel Jackson. People call me Zeke. I'm Deontay's cousin." Tashona frowned. Deontay had never mentioned a cousin. Zeke forced a grin. "We didn't get along as kids. My family moved to Atlanta when I was 10. I came back recently." "Until that robbery," Tashona cut in. "What robbery?" Zeke hesitated, then sank onto the leather couch. He glanced at the panoramic windows, then back at her. "Sit down. It's a long story." She stayed standing. "I came back to San Marcos 6 years ago," he began. "I had trouble in Atlanta, trouble with the law. I needed to disappear. Deontay helped me. He let me crash on your couch for a few nights while you were working nights." Tashona's memory flickered. There had been someone staying with him for a short while. She remembered now, vaguely. "We came up with a plan. A stupid plan to rob a gas station. I wore a mask. I went in. Something went wrong. A guard saw me. There was a fight. I ran. The next day, their cameras showed my face, but they matched it to Deontay." Her knees went weak. "You're telling me my husband's serving time for a crime you committed?" Zeke nodded, looking away. "I had a record already. If they caught me again, I'd be facing much worse. I let him take the fall. He confessed, said it was him. 15 years. He flinched as if the words hurt him. "I know. I feel awful. I promised I'd take care of his family." Tashona laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Take care? His mom died. I'm barely keeping the lights on working 2 jobs. She rounded on him. You disappeared. You ruined our lives, and now you live under his name with a wife and baby." Zeke's expression shifted. The remorse drained away and something cold slithered in. "What are you going to do, Tash? Go to the police? Say the guy in prison is innocent because his cousin confessed? Do you have proof?" His voice grew hard. "There's only my word against his confession." She felt the truth of his words like a blow. She had no proof, only the haunting certainty of what she'd seen. "I can tell your wife," she said. "Tell her you're not who you say you are." Zeke's face contorted. He stepped forward. She backed away. "Don't you dare come near me," he warned, voice low and dangerous. "If you ruin my life, I'll ruin yours. Do you think Deontay's life in prison is good? I can make it worse for him. I have connections." "Are you threatening me?" she asked. He pulled out his phone and shoved a photo at her. Deontay sitting in the prison cafeteria, surrounded by other inmates. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "A friend of mine works at Oakdale," Zeke said. "He's keeping an eye on Deontay for me. For now." Cold fear threaded through her. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. Zeke pocketed the phone. "Forget you ever saw me. Go back to your life. I'll go back to mine. Everyone will be better off." "Better?" Tashona's voice rose. "My husband is rotting in a cell for something he didn't do, and you're living as him like it's nothing. How is that better?" "Deontay made his own choice," Zeke replied coldly. "He chose to protect me. That was his decision. Because he thought you were his brother." Tashona shouted. "He trusted you, and you—" She stopped herself, her voice breaking under the weight of rage and disgust. Zeke stared back at her, silent. His face, so eerily similar to Deontay's, carried none of the warmth or kindness, only an impenetrable hardness. "Leave," he said finally, his tone sharp. "Don't come back, for Deontay's sake and for your own good." Tashona wanted to unleash every thought boiling inside her, but she knew it was pointless. Zeke felt no remorse. He wasn't just selfish. He was dangerous. A man who had exploited his own cousin and built a stolen life. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the panes rattled. Outside, she drew in a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. Her mind raced in circles. What now? Zeke was right. She had no proof. It was his word against hers. If she went to the police, Deontay could end up paying the price. But then there was Sheniqua. That woman had been living in ignorance, raising a child with a man hiding behind another man's life. She deserved to know the truth. Instead of heading toward the bus stop, Tashona ducked into a small cafe near the park. She ordered a cup of coffee, needing time to think, to form a plan. By late afternoon, her decision was made. She would wait for Sheniqua to return and tell her everything. As dusk fell, Tashona returned to number 34, Oak Street. Zeke's silver sedan was still in the driveway, meaning he hadn't left. She hid behind a large oak tree across the street, watching the house. 1 hour passed. Then another. The neighborhood grew quiet, lights flickering on in living rooms and bedrooms. Inside Zeke's home, the glow of lamps spread from the living room and what looked like an upstairs bedroom. Finally, around 9 o'clock, a cab pulled up. Sheniqua stepped out, cradling her sleeping baby against her shoulder. She paid the driver and walked to the house. Tashona watched as she unlocked the door and slipped inside. This was her moment, the perfect time to speak while the baby slept. But before she could cross the street, a piercing scream ripped through the night. The sound was so raw, so filled with terror, that Tashona froze. A second scream followed, louder, more desperate. Something was horribly wrong. Without another thought, Tashona sprinted across the street. The front door hung ajar, left unlatched in the panic. Inside, muffled sobs and broken wails echoed down the hallway. She ran toward the sound and found herself in the kitchen. The sight stopped her cold. Sheniqua stood pressed against the wall, clutching her now awake, crying child with one arm while covering her mouth with the other. Tears streamed down her face. On the floor, sprawled in a pool of blood, lay Zeke, his lifeless eyes staring upward, a gunshot wound gaping in his chest. Moments later, the flashing red and blue of police cars painted the quiet street of Riverside Estates. Neighbors in bathrobes and slippers gathered on their lawns, whispering as officers cordoned off the scene with yellow tape. Number 34, Oak Street, was swarming with activity. Uniformed officers moved in and out, while forensic techs in white jumpsuits documented every detail. Tashona sat in the back of a squad car, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She hadn't been cuffed, but an officer had told her to stay put until a detective arrived. In a separate car sat Sheniqua, still trembling, her baby in her arms. A social worker tried to persuade her to hand the child over to a relative for the night, but she refused, clutching him as though he were the only anchor left in her world. An unmarked black SUV rolled up to the curb. A tall woman in a tailored suit stepped out, sharp eyes sweeping the scene. After speaking briefly with the officers, she walked straight to the squad car where Tashona sat. Detective Lakesha Murdoch, homicide. She introduced herself, sliding into the seat beside her. Her expression was firm, her gaze unflinching. "And you must be Tashona Butler, I presume?" Tashona nodded, her hands trembling in her lap. "I didn't kill him," she whispered. "That's what we're here to find out," Murdoch replied evenly, pulling out a notebook. "Start from the beginning." So Tashona did. She told her about the man who looked like her husband, about discovering it was Ezekiel Jackson, Deontay's cousin. She explained his confession, his threats, and how she'd come back intending to tell Sheniqua everything. When she finished, Murdoch leaned back. "So, you're saying Ezekiel Jackson was impersonating your husband, who's currently serving time in federal prison?" "Yes. He admitted it to me this afternoon," Tashona said. "And he threatened me if I told his wife or the police. And after that conversation, I left, but then I decided to come back. I waited for Sheniqua. When she went inside, I heard her scream. That's when I ran in and found him." Murdoch studied her, silent for a long moment. "Do you have an alibi for the time between leaving Jackson's house and returning tonight?" Tashona shook her head. "I was at a coffee shop near the park, then just walking around, trying to think. I doubt anyone noticed me." "I see." Murdoch closed her notebook. "Ms. Butler, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for further questioning. Is that all right?" It wasn't a request, and Tashona knew it. "Of course," she said softly. At the station, She was led into a stark interrogation room. Gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, and the looming presence of a two-way mirror. Detective Murdoch entered minutes later, carrying a folder. She placed several photos on the table. Zeke's body lying in blood on the kitchen floor. Ezekiel Jackson, she said, her tone professional, shot in the chest at close range. Preliminary time of death is between 1,700 and 1,900 hours. The weapon, a .38 caliber pistol, was not recovered. Tashona tore her gaze away from the pictures. I didn't kill him, she repeated. You had motive, Murdoch said flatly. A strong one. This man stole your husband's identity, ruined his life. Any woman in your shoes would be furious. Yes, I was furious, Tashona admitted, her voice rising. But I'm not a killer. I don't even own a gun. That's easy enough to verify, Murdoch replied. We'll test for gunpowder residue. Do you consent? Of course. Murdoch summoned an officer who escorted Tashona for the test. When they returned, Sheniqua was waiting in the interrogation room, pale, shaken, her eyes swollen with tears. The baby was no longer with her. Miss Parker has agreed to speak with you while I'm present, Detective Murdoch explained to Tashona. I think you two have some things that need to be said. Sheniqua turned to Tashona, her eyes clouded with fear and confusion. You said he's not Deontay, that his real name is Ezekiel? Tashona nodded. My husband, Deontay Butler, is incarcerated at Oakdale Federal Prison in Louisiana. The man you live with was his cousin, Ezekiel Jackson. He used Deontay's name to create a new life. Sheniqua covered her face with her hands. I didn't know. He told me his family died in a car crash. He said he had no one. He was lying, Tashona said softly. I'm sorry. Detective Murdoch watched the exchange carefully, her expression unreadable. Miss Parker, when did you first meet the man you believe was Deontay? 2 years ago in Dallas, Sheniqua answered, wiping her tears. I was working as a waitress. He came in as a customer. Said he worked at a bank. We started dating, then got married. When I got pregnant, we moved here to San Marcos. Did he ever mention problems with anyone? Someone who might want to hurt him? Sheniqua hesitated. Lately, he seemed tense. Always on the phone, whispering like he didn't want you to hear. Once, I overheard him begging someone for more time, promising he'd pay back the money soon. Money? Murdoch leaned forward. So he owed someone? I don't know, Sheniqua admitted, shaking her head. He never told me about any debts. We always had plenty of cash. Murdoch jotted down notes. Miss Parker, do you recognize the name Leroy Turner? Sheniqua frowned. No, I've never heard of him. Have you, Miss Butler? Tashona shook her head. No. Murdoch gave a slight nod, as though she expected that. Thank you, ladies. Ms. Parker, an officer will escort you home. Ms. Butler, I'll need you to stay a little longer. Before leaving, Sheniqua turned back to Tashona. I'm sorry about your husband. I didn't know. I believe you, Tashona said quietly. After Sheniqua left, Tashona sat alone until Murdoch returned with a folder. Good news, Miss Butler. The gunshot residue test came back negative, and we have surveillance footage from the bank across from Jackson's house. At 5:35 p.m., a gray sedan pulled up, a man identified as Leroy Turner, an infamous loan shark out of San Antonio. When inside, he stayed 10 minutes before leaving. That matches the time of death. Relief washed over Tashona. So, I can go? Almost. Murdoch opened the folder. We also ran a background check on Ezekiel Jackson. He had prior convictions in Atlanta for fraud and forgery. And yes, he really was your husband's cousin. Oakdale Prison confirmed Deontay Butler is in their custody. I even requested a photo. She slid the picture across the table. It was Deontay, thinner, dressed in a prison uniform, but still smiling that familiar smile. That's him, Tashona whispered, her throat tight with tears. The resemblance between him and Jackson is uncanny, Murdoch said. But what troubles me is the story Jackson told you, that your husband took the blame for his crime. Official records showed Deontay confessed to the robbery. The evidence pointed to him. But now you know Zeke was capable of it, Tashona pressed. Murdoch gave a firm nod, and we'll dig into every detail. If there's proof of your husband's innocence, we'll find it. Thank you, Tashona said softly. You're free to go, Murdoch told her, closing the folder. But don't leave town. You're still a key witness in a murder investigation. Outside the station, the cool night air felt heavy and strange. It was past midnight, yet her mind was too restless for sleep. She cabbed home, drained by the day's chaos. In the days that followed, she kept close contact with Murdoch. Soon after, news broke. Leroy Turner had been arrested in San Antonio. He confessed to shooting Ezekiel Jackson. Claiming Jackson owed him a large debt, he refused to pay. What mattered most to Tashona, however, was that Deontay's case was finally being re-examined. Investigators discovered inconsistencies in witness testimony, and the fingerprints on a robbery weapon didn't fully match Deontay's. Hope, for the first time in years, flickered alive. A week after Zeke's death, Tashona took the trip she'd been dreading for half a decade. She boarded a bus for Oakdale Federal Prison. The 9-hour ride blurred by, her thoughts consumed with what she would say to Deontay and how he would react. Oakdale loomed like a fortress, all concrete walls and barbed wire. After check-in, she entered the visiting room, her stomach in knots. Then the door opened. Deontay walked in, thinner, hair cropped short, but still carrying that same warm smile. Tash! He wrapped his arms around her as much as the rules allowed. It's so good to see you. She hugged him tightly. Me too, Dee. I have so much to tell you. They sat, hands locked together. What's wrong? He asked, reading her face. And so she told him about Zeke, his lies, his threats, and his death. Deontay's eyes widened. Zeke's gone? And he really pretended to be me all these years. Yes. Tashona squeezed his hands. But there's good news. Murdoch is reopening your case. They found inconsistencies that might prove you're innocent. Deontay shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe this. I thought I was protecting him. He swore he'd take care of you, take care of Mama. I was so naive. No, Tashona said firmly. You were kind, too kind for this world. And where did it get me? He gestured to the prison walls around them. Home, she whispered. You're coming home. I believe it. He looked at her with fragile hope. You really think so? Yes. Her tears finally fell. And I won't stop fighting until you're free. The guard announced the end of visitation. They stood, embracing one last time. I love you, Tash, Deontay whispered. Always have. I love you too, she said. And I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. As she left the prison, exhaustion and hope tangled inside her chest. Her life had been shattered in one day, but from the ruins, something new was taking root. Truth, justice, and maybe, finally, a reunion with the man she'd never stopped loving. If you're drawn to stories like this, where love, betrayal, and obsession collide, be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.